reserve should be, but what I'm hearing from Standards and Poor, and they call and check before we issue this next bond. I'm gonna have to talk to Standards and Poor, and I'm gonna have to show a good faith effort that we're trying to keep things in the middle of the road. They're gonna tell me, and I've got emails, and if you want to, I'll be happy to share my emails with you, where they would sit. Is your standard still keeping 25% in reserve? And if our standard's to keep 25% in reserve, and our budget's 32 million, a fourth of that is $8 million. Okay? And if we take $1 million out, I don't know that we'll take $1 million out this year, but if we take $1 million, we got 9.1 in, we'll be landing 8, or close to 8. So we'll be laying right at the standard that they lay for us to keep our bond rating. And I'm conscientious about the bond rating because we're going to issue this sewer bond. And I know it's a sewer bond, but they ask questions. One of the key points they ask about is what's going on with the general fund. They're going to be asking general fund questions, and I want to be able to tell them that our goal is to keep a balanced budget. I know there's no way we can make it come out to zero every year. If we do, I'm tracking with the numbers at that point. There's no way we're going to make it come back to zero. I just can't do that. I've seen people do it, but they're definitely messing with the numbers, because the company I used to work for, we can make it come back to exactly what we told them. If every year come back to the exact same number that we budgeted. How do you do that? You got to be cooking the books in. I'm not cooking no books here. The numbers are what they are.
Okay, I'll ask one more question before I get about getting that. I mean, how much per year do we spend on the public safety program?
You talking about the bond payment?
Sure.
It's $1 million a year.
Million.
But keep in mind, when you talk about the $1 million bond payment for the public safety building.
We're going to be paying that for another 10 years. Right?
About 12 years. It's a 16-year bond payment. We paid probably, we took the bond out in 2006, so we're about 4 years into this deal. But here's the thing with the bond payment there. Just keep in mind that cash flow, I know we took out money. We had to do something because of the public safety bill. We had to have a facility. But here's the deal. Cash flow wise, we didn't really lose anything when he went, because we had a bond that we were paying off, this West Frankfort,
water.
Yeah, the West Frankfort storm drainage system. We had a $10 million bond on there. We just finished paying that off, and we were paying $1.3 million a year on that, and that went to the 15-year bond that we spread for the public safety bill. So actually, cash flow wise, we picked up $300,000 or whatever.
I think that does get a little tricky.
Yeah, but I'm just saying,
we're not making $300,000 a year in public safety.
No, I didn't say that we were, but I'm saying cash flow wise, we did not
take us another 10 years at least to finish paying it off. My point is that and that's going to be that $1 million in a $30 million budget, that's going to be a hit that we're going to have to deal with for the next 10 or 12 years.
Yeah, it's part of our fixed costs. That's what I was saying.
Absolutely. And I realize there's this debate about whether or not we should keep 25% of our budget in reserve, and setting that debate aside, if that affects our bond rating, then fair enough. I agree that it chafes, it hurts to eat into our reserve in order to just kind of keep the ship going, in order to maintain, in order to just keep the wheels on the bus, so to speak. Which I guess is even an apt analogy, since a lot of what we're talking about eating into the reserve is literally keeping the wheels on the bus, or fleet maintenance. The point is that unless things outside of our control, like state government, magically improve, and I'm not holding my breath on the state turning around, anytime soon. I think their belt's going to stay tight for a while, probably.
That's what it sounds like.
I'm sure of it. And there's even bigger things than that. Things aren't looking good. Things still aren't looking very good in Europe. Europe goes far enough south, that affects federal government. Federal government takes a hit, that's gonna affect the state. The state takes a hit, that's gonna affect us. So what's happening in Greece these days does have the potential to affect us. But, I mean, things have been steadily improving, but economically, it seems like we're still looking at stormy weather, for part of ways. It seems like my point is that I don't know if it, just weathering the storm is, I'm afraid that if we try to hold on to the reserves as best we can and just try to weather the storm, however long the storm goes, and the storm could last 10 years. I mean, who knows when the economy's really going to turn around. I'm concerned that in the long run, I guess my point, without getting negative about it, I guess my point is it would be more in the city's benefit for us to try to be proactive and to try to invest some of what we have in, long-term cost-saving measures or long-term investments. And sometimes we've got to spend some money up front to save money in the long run. But if, for example, we can spend, I'm just going to make something up. If, for example, we can spend, $500,000 one time this year to save $200,000 a year, every year, ongoing, then yeah, that hits us right now. Within 3 years, we're 100 ahead, on and on and on, et cetera. But if we're talking about actually climbing out of this hole over the long term, I mean, I think that's the kind of approach we have to take. And that's, and it's kind of a philosophical discussion, I guess, but that's, if we're talking about, general approach to the budget, I think the appropriate time to have a talk about what the city's priorities are going forward in terms of the future of the city. It's not after the budget's been compiled and presented to us. It's at the ground. It's at the ground level. And
I will say one thing in reference to what you're talking about. We've asked each manager this year to give a detailed description of what their needs are for their department for the future. So every year they're going to have a detailed list of their future needs, so that everybody knows what we've been kind of saving for and what's coming up, so we don't lose sight of our goals and objectives going forward. So we will have that information prepared by each manager. So I think that'll be really helpful. And we'll be looking at the for 1 year, because my thing is, I try to look at this thing, the big picture, what I'm trying to look at, what we're doing in all the funds, what we've been doing for not just the last 2 years. I realize that, you see the last 2 years because that's what you've been involved in, and I understand that. But from my perspective, I
get that.
I feel the whole 6 years that I've been here, and I'm sure Jimmy would say he could give me some advice about when he was here. But I feel that whole period, so I want to make sure you all realize where we came from. I think it's important that we don't. What I learned over the years, I've been doing this thing for about 30 years, and what I've learned is try not to repeat the mistakes of the past, and that's what I've tried. That's what I try to practice. Because my objective is to protect the assets of the city, and to do that, I don't want to be a bean counter over here. I want to tell everybody what's going on, and when you ask a question, I want to answer your question frankly, and when all the commission, when Katie asks a question, I want to ask her, I want to answer a question. When Gibby calls me, I try to answer the questions. And that is just not coming from you guys. I'm getting questions. I probably spend 30 to 40% of my time talking, trying to answer questions about tax bills, about the garbage fee. I'm talking constantly, but that's part of my job, man. I don't think you want me to sit in there and be a bean counter with a muzzle over my mouth. I'm just not.
Amen.
I'm not going to do that. So, I don't know. Sorry.
What do you think?
I've got a couple of questions related to the budget that I
What if then Commissioner may be next?
Well, that I would have asked of Jeff if he had been here. So, if you don't mind, Brett, if I could just share this with you, maybe we could get about garbage, but as it relates to the budget. If you wouldn't mind asking Jeff to give us some feedback maybe next week. I know that based on the results of the cart request forms, that the anticipated revenue was a little under 300. I also understand that there have been a bunch of change outs, which we ended, which we expected there to be. But I guess I'm just curious to know.
I think we're still laying
What that
about, I think we're still laying about 3 is what I heard today. I might be speaking out of turn, but I think we're still laying, that's where we're still laying at. But 3 probably means, 250, 275 because the collection rate's not.
Collections.
Yeah.
That was just curiosity. Also, and I guess if Jeff could talk to us about what they're seeing, what the department is seeing so far in terms of the recycling rate. I know it's not being quantified hard, but if
Floating around not too much.
Generally, I think it's up. I don't know how much.
Yeah, I heard it was up pretty significantly.
what I've heard is maybe already doubled.
That's kind of what I was hearing too. But I don't know, that's what I thought Tom said.
And if that's the case, that means it's already hit it was 12%, so if it's, it sounds like maybe we've already hit the 15% that we were doing a 5-year projection on. We had to hit 15%, a 15% increase over 5 years, in order for that low-end estimate to pan out. If we hit this 15% already, then that's obviously a good sign, but that's something I'd like to know.
I'll get a report from.
That'd be great. And I'm glad the mayor gave us a more detailed breakdown on what's going into the anticipated, 32 point, so, but one thing I guess I don't understand, I'm not challenging this, I'm just asking to understand it. So there was $200,000 maybe that turns into $400,000? Yeah.
Okay, when we made a budget amendment for 2% raise
Sure.
for half a year, that was $200,000.
Right.
You see, we didn't have anything in the budget. We was wanting to wait till January and then try to go 1%.
Yeah,
And then
try to absorb it.
absorb it in the other revenue, but it wasn't a part of the budget. So now, that's $200,000 for 6
Half the
months.
year that
So
is 400.
so it's gonna be $200,000 more.
Right.
Yeah,
Got it.
okay.
Really not trying to, we all just need to understand this stuff, I'm not trying to challenge. I think that answers the questions I have. I really don't have a philosophical discussion about what the budget looks like, and what the authority is going to be. I guess one note I'll make, though, it doesn't have anything to do with the budget, but it came up in the mayor's discussion. Talking about regarding meet and confer, talking about meet and confer is not, we've been discouraged from even talking about it on the presumption that meet and confer leads to, this, that, and the other.
Okay,
When I understand that meet and confer has the potential to obligate the city in certain ways, but I really don't see the harm in us at least talking about it.
You mean talking with the union about it?
With anybody about it, yeah.
Well, I dare say now, we can sit here and talk about it, we're gonna have to meet and confer, then there's nothing wrong right here. We say, hey, we're gonna meet and confer. No, we're not gonna meet and confer, what have you. But if you meet with my understanding, Mr. Moore, correct me if I'm wrong, what is, if we as a city commission meet with the organization of the unions, then we have in essence, and when they're, other than just employees, if they come to us as a union, then we in essence, from what I was told, we have acknowledged that we have recognized them, and then if you go to court on that, then, okay.
Well, and here's my understanding, first of all, with the caveat, I am not a union expert, but I had talked to people that practice law in that area, just because we did bring up the the use of the phrase meet and confer to meet with individual employees, not specifically the union. And in that context, the attorneys that I talked with that practice in the area said, you know, if the city commission wants to meet with individual city employees or groups of city employees, that's fine, but he would recommend that we use a different term rather than meet and confer, because that is a term that has traditionally been used when you're talking about discussions with unions. And so again, he suggested that if we can come up with another term, we would be wise to do so if we are going to meet with individuals or groups of employees from the city, or if the city commission is going to meet with them. And then also, again, the problem with using that term is that traditionally it's been associated with agreeing to negotiate with the union, and that's how it will be construed, or someone will attempt to have the court construe it if we have legal issues concerning those meetings.
I guess my question is, I'm sorry, I'm done. I guess my question is, and this is hypothetical, but let's say next week, I'm not suggesting we've got plenty to talk about next week. Let's say we include in the discussion items, discussion of, quote, meet and confer. As in where we discuss this, we basically have this conversation. We put it on the agenda, as in whether or not we should meet and confer, what are the consequences, et cetera. We put that on the agenda, discussion of meet and confer. And a union rep comes, or multiple, members of the union come, and identify themselves as such in citizen comments and give their opinion on whether or not we should meet and confer with them. Is there anything binding about that?
I think as long as you are discussing it amongst yourselves, just the city commission, and then you're receiving comments from members of the public, I think that you're okay. But again, I would prefer, of course, I'm being very cautious because I don't want us to take a step that we will have a difficult time reversing later. I would prefer that instead of referring it as meet and confer discussions, that we use some other term. Now, if the commission is interested in talking about whether or not to recognize a union, then that's kind of a different issue. To me, talking to employees is one issue, and I know the commission has been interested in doing that. And I would suggest that you refer to that as employee conversations or something like that, rather than use the term meet and confer. Now, if the commission is looking at the other issue of actually recognizing a union, then that's really not, that really is not a discussion of meet and confer. Instead, that would be called, discussions about recognizing a union.
That's all the clarification I see.
Okay.
Commissioner May had his hand up, and then Commissioner Turner.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll try to go. Since we're kind of talking about history, I think it was interesting. Someone brought up this prior knowledge about budgets, so I just wanted to kind of chat a little bit about what happened in the past few years that I've observed, and I watched the city before I was on the commission too for years. The city had a really good revenue stream from state government, and what we did was we prioritized projects amongst the different commissions, and those commissions changed for a while. And once we got those prioritized projects on a list, we started saving money to build our reserve account up. And then we got to a certain point, then we had enough money to do the drainage project on West Frankfort. Drainage issues were huge, and it was costing a lot of staff time and resources. Every time it rained, we had to send out people in overtime. So in the end, it was more cost effective to go ahead and do those big projects to get neighborhood drainage issues under control. At least we tried in all the different neighborhoods. And then did the, then after that, the next thing was public safety was always number one, but we were able to do the drainage project first. Because people, there were houses that were getting flooded, we had some lawsuits against the city, so we had to do it. And we got some state funding as well for West Frankfort. And then in the Home Street area, the governor and our state legislative delegation, which I believe you were there at the time, as representative there.
I missed it.
I'm sorry, I said then back then when the Home Street drainage project was done, the governor, we asked the governor to help with that, and then our legislative delegation, which is, I believe you were in the House at the time, and
Yes, yes.
Senator Marshall Long were there, so we got some help from the state on that. So we did those drainage projects, and then we still needed the public safety issues, and the public safety building came as a result of the police building falling into such disrepair that every time it would rain, there were leaks. The heating and cooling system wasn't working. We had, pardon me?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. And so then we were able to move that project up at the end of, we prioritized that, said once the drainage bond was paid off, we would go ahead and move towards the public safety building. But we built up the reserve to like,
It was laying at 14.
it was like 14.7, almost $15 million, but we'll say 14.5, 14.7. And that was in 2006 when we approved that. And then by the time it got built, we had Hurricane Katrina, which drove all the construction costs up beyond what anybody else would have predicted. And then what we looked at is if when we bonded the public safety building, it would not affect the bond, because we were already budgeting 1.3 or whatever it was. And so then the public safety building, the bond for that was going to be less, it was going to be $1 million, right about $1 million. So we saw that our cash flow would actually not be affected in a bad way. In fact, we'd still have $300,000 projected more revenue per year to be able to cover equipment, needed things like that, personnel. But the point with that was it didn't affect how we were budgeting, because we already had budgeted for that $1.3 million bond issue anyway. So we didn't have to go back and have department heads cut, because we'd already set the budget sort of an established rate. And then we said after that was done, we would try to do the aquatic or indoor recreational facility, which is bounced back around. So at that point, the number 2 issue behind the public safety building, which was done, was the aquatic / recreation facility. So then that moved to the top, but then of course we have like commissions change, so it's always ever changing with what priorities are going to be. So, but that's a little bit how we got to the point. So we actually had long-range planning and had an actual vision of what we were going to do, which included the big neighborhood drainage projects, and those were massive projects. Then we did some other smaller projects, and the next big project was public safety. And then after that, we were going to try to do the aquatic / recreation facility. But the economy went bad on us, and so then we had to back up. Nobody predicted 6 years ago that we'd be still in an economic downturn that we're in. And nobody knows when it's going to end. Hopefully, sooner or later. And then the state had to cut back because of that. So that's sort of where we are. And we haven't been buying equipment like we were buying beforehand, because the equipment budget has pretty much been used for departments to try to balance what they needed in personnel and just the basic. Just operating costs, yes. So that's kind of where we are. And I sometimes forget that maybe we need to kind of go back and see how we got to where we are in terms of what we're spending, what percentage of our budget is personnel, and the personnel cost has been a huge issue. You said 73% is our personnel cost.
Yeah, it's the wages.
And then we used to have about 72 to 74, 75% of our revenue stream in occupational tax. Part of that was from state government. So when that contracted, that left us in a more precarious situation to try to go back to department heads. So I guess that's another perspective from elected officials' side, and some people might not agree with that, but that's we go back and we can show you the years that we did those projects and had those on the table, and how long it took us years to get to the point where we could save money to do the drainage projects. But in that time, people were getting their houses damaged with floods. On a big, I mean, there was 500-600 houses, which are like the public works, but that was what was affected in the western Frankfort side. And the Home Street side, of course, we're still seeing that project ongoing. It's not complete yet, but it's a big start. So that's how long it takes to do these things. So we're still doing projects with Home Street, things that were done, that were started back in 99, 2000 range is how long it takes. And back then, nobody would have thought, oh, we'll not even have money to buy police cars. But nobody would have believed that, because we were buying 10 or 12.
We're buying 10 police cars every year.
I think at one point, we might have even bought 12, but now we've contracted that back to where last year was the asset forfeiture account that bought those. So again, I mean, those are all things to look at, and I still would love to be able to build that recreation facility, what we call it, aquatic center or wellness center.
Phase program.
What is it? Oh, phase, I'm sorry.
Folded topic.
Whatever, and then it's changed, now it's starting to look like change it. But anyway, I just wanted to give that perspective out there, not as, anything other than just say that's where we were. I wish you all could have served, or could serve, when we had lots of money, to know what that feels like when you get to do a big project and see something that you've worked on for several years get to be done, you're like, oh my gosh, we actually did it. I mean, it's the best feeling in the world. The most frustrating feeling in the world is where we're now with an economy that's bad, not because we did anything wrong, but because of, it's as a result of, I guess you could trace it back to one industry, bad mortgages and things like that, but that's where we are. And we're faced with the decisions now of not having a lot of money to deal with, to try to prioritize. And we all want, there's all projects that we all want to do. I still want to see that facility, wellness center, whatever the new term was going to be by the time it probably will get done. But I know reality was, I'd just be giving false hope if I said we could put that in the budget this year.
I'm hoping we'll bring some
Mr. Turner, do you have a comment you'd like?
Well,
I
was gonna make a request.
It's okay, you got your rights to speak all you want to, but I would like for us to move this thing.
Well, that's what, you're gonna like my request. And I was the person, or I'm the commissioner who proposed the board appointment process, looking at that. I would like to request from other commissioners that we move that to next meeting's agenda and immediately go into closed session.
Is there any opposition to that?
It's the best thing I heard all night.
Well, I would entertain any of it. Commissioner, who will make the motion? You want to make the motion? You know the KRS?
Actually, no.
That's Commissioner May.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session for KRS 61.8.10.1 sub B to discuss property.
No second. Okay, call roll.
Commissioner Wilder? Commissioner Wilder?
Yes.
Commissioner Hayden?
Yes.
Commissioner Turner?
Yes.
Commissioner May?
Yes.
Mayor Graham? Fred? I'm gonna need somebody to help me carry something back.
My issue with that is,
Just have to look at it.
sometimes you get all